domain and range of a linear function that models a real-world situation. So here's my context. A construction crew is lengthening a road. Let L be the total length of the road in miles, and let D be the number of days the crew has worked. Suppose that L, the length, is equal to 3 times D, or the number of days they work, plus 200. It gives L as a function of D. The crew can work for at most 80 days. So identify the correct description of the values in both the domain and the range of the function. Then for each, choose the most appropriate set of values. So I want to know which one represents the domain, the days, the D, or the L, right? The length of the road. This is the L, length of the road, and this is the D, the number of days the crew has worked. So if we look at the equation here, we need to think in terms of inputs and outputs. Domain are my inputs, right? And the range are my outputs, or Y values, right? You can think of these as the Y values and these as the X values. Now, my equation isn't in terms of X's and Y's, right? It's D and L. But if you think about this logically, okay, the length of the road is going to be the after effect, right? If we work more days, the road gets longer, okay? If we work less days, the road is shorter. So this is the input. We also call it the independent variable, okay? So this is going to represent my X's, or my inputs, or my domain, is the number of days the crew has worked. And they tell me right here, L is a function of D, okay? So L represent the function values. D are my inputs, okay? Function values are the outputs. So my range, or the outputs, are going to be the length of the road, okay? Because the length is the function of D, right? Or the function values are the length. So now I need to choose my set of values. Now, I can't actually pull down my menu here to see what the options are, but we're going to think about it. So the number of days the crew has worked. Well, the least number of days that they can work is 0. You can't work for negative days, okay? And it says the crew can work for at most 80 days. So they can work anywhere between 0 and 80 days. So when we're choosing our answer here, we just need to consider, could they work a partial day? Could they work 20.2 days, right? Or 25.5 days? And the answer is yes, right? Partial days here as part of our domain is perfectly logical in this context. So I don't have just whole numbers here, right? 0, 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days. I can also consider partial days, right? So after they've worked, let's say, 15.8 days, how long is the road, right? Because the road is continually growing and getting longer, right, the longer they work. So here, my domain is going to be the set of all real numbers from 0 to 80. Because I can work 0 days at a minimum, 80 days at the maximum, and anywhere in between, including partial days. Okay, so I have all real numbers. Now, I need to figure out my range. So if I put 0, or if I work for 0 days, okay, so I have my equation here, L equals 3D plus 20. If I put 0 in for the number of days worked, or I put 3 times 0 plus 20, okay, or this isn't 20, it's 200, okay. 3 3 times 0 is 0 plus 200 is 200, right? So my L is 200. So the very minimum, the starting length of the road before the crew started working was 200 miles. So the very minimum length of the road is going to be 200 miles when they worked 0 days. Now I want to know what's the maximum length of the road. So at the other end, if they work all 80 days, how long could the road get? So again, I'm going to use my function equation here. So L equals 3D plus 200. So instead of D, days, I'm going to put in the maximum, or 80. So 3 times 80 plus 200. Okay, 3 times 80 is 240, plus another 200 would be 440 as my output. So my range, the length of the road, could go anywhere from 200 miles at the shortest to 440 miles at the longest, and anywhere in between there, depending on how many days they've worked. So my range is going to be the set of all real numbers from 200 to 440. Shortest length of the road, maximum length of the road, and anywhere in between.